They don't create Gotham as just sort of this like hyperbole, caricature, violent, crime-ridden place. Yes, you are aware that bad things are happening, but they are adding a human element that is necessary so that you don't other the people in Gotham. Social contracts were broken. Police failed them. The politicians failed them. And so turning into other spaces and creating that on their own, I feel like is a better way of telling the story about people in an area like Gotham, especially if you're using, comics in like a metaphorical level.
Crazy Stupid Podcast.
Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, if this is your first time watching, we'd love it if you could hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell so that you are aware of when we post things.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Crazy Stupid Podcast.
So not we.
Yeah. I'm just going to be sitting here.
I have been watching The Penguin. I've been really enjoying my time. I've been really trying to think through like what has been making this Matt Reaves Batman universe, this Matt Reaves Batman DC universe stand out so much in comparison to the other ones. I think the reason why it's been doing so well for me is because of the way he has spent time letting us as the viewer sit with Gotham, sit with the people and everything that's there. That was something that I really appreciated that we got in the Batman, where even in the opening scene, Bruce is, he's talking about his inner turmoil and his motive, and you're getting glimpses of like different criminals doing certain acts. But there were a few where it was like, that makes me feel a little uncomfortable that you're sort of lumping them in with some of the like more violent offenders, right? Like the person who's like spray painting on what looked like a bank, like liar or whatever. It's kind of like, all right. I think that's a very valid emotional response to the state of Gotham. But the reason why I have really appreciated The Penguin is that they have gone even deeper in that perspective, because they don't create Gotham as just sort of this like hyperbole, sort of caricature, violent, crime-ridden place. Those things are existing there, but it almost takes a bit of like the Wire approach, where yes, you are aware that bad things are happening, but they are adding a human element that is necessary so that you don't other the people in Gotham, which I feel like that's important. You've got Oswald who's doing his thing. He's trying to build up whatever his empire, but he talks about the person named Rex, who he sort of looked up to when he was a kid. Obviously gangster in Gotham, but he mentions a few things. Like it wasn't just like self-respect, but it was like he was obviously like taking care of the community, and he mentions all these other things that were happening, and it is a direct result of systems failing that city, right? Like there's moments where like the electricity kind of gets turned off in certain portions, and it's revealed that the richer people in Gotham have been sort of like lobbying for more of that energy being sent to the more suburban areas. And I don't know, it just kind of reminded me of like why, at least the more recent ones, I think The Dark Knight Rises tried to touch on it, but I don't think they did it as well. They've sort of shown that like there are like clear structural problems happening in that town, 100%, whether it's through politicians, whether it's just through wealth inequality. But then they break that down and saying like, here's how it's happening structurally. And then on individual levels, here is how paradigm shifts take place to individuals once that happens. Like there's a lack of self-determination and a lack of self-respect that a lot of these people feel, which then results in them turning into places where they feel like they can gain that. Like that's a natural human response to those things. But then they also kind of explore that like social contracts were broken. Police failed them. The politicians failed them. Whatever government structures that were there, those things failed them. And so turning into other spaces and creating that on their own, I feel like is a better way of telling the story about people in an area like Gotham, especially if you're using, comics in like a metaphorical level. And it just kind of got me thinking about the Dark Knight Returns story arc. This is with what Frank Miller does a couple of decades ago, and it sort of birthed the darker tone of Batman for like since where we're at right now. A lot of people have been inspired by the work that he did. It sort of changed the trajectory of where Batman went. But there was just a few things that I remember like looking back at it were like extremely problematic, especially now when you're seeing what Matt Reaves is doing with the Batman and with Penguin and how he has reshaped the way we should think about Gotham. I think Frank Miller was trying to tell this story where like he probably viewed himself as someone that was trying to critique the absurdities or like extremes on like conservative and liberal sides of things. I think his bias as someone that most people sort of agree is a little bit more conservative libertarian. I think that blocked him from critiquing things in the best way, because I think he tried to use the most outlandish examples of more like like progressive / liberal ideas as a way to show that these things don't work. People are like getting interviewed about like the state of Gotham. Like they're on the news, and then this one individual says, we have to strive to reintegrate the disenfranchised back into society. So initially I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then it's sort of implied that the person gets asked a question like, sorry, no, I don't live in the city. And it was like he was trying to say that like, oh, like your ideas are kind of fluky, like they're kind of up there. You're not living through it, and clearly these things wouldn't work, but you don't see it that way. It's almost like he was kind of trying to critique like liberal elites of like, you've got all of these thoughtful ideas, but like in actuality, they don't work. That's how it sort of came across. I don't know. It felt like more of like a bad faith argument. And I think that's why it's been a little bit more refreshing with where they've done in sort of making Gotham feel a little bit more human. Like there's moments where Frank Miller is critiquing fascism with the way that Batman has sort of tried to monopolize safety and law and order in Gotham. But at the end of the story, like his method does sort of succeed. So and then it's like you can't try to critique it hoping that like the nuance of point A to point B will land for people when the final destination is that Batman's plan does work. But I felt like so far with what we've gotten in Penguin and with the Batman, I think has done a better job of not like normalizing all of the crime that's happening in Gotham, but just adding a little bit more substance and depth. Sometimes it felt like Frank Miller was like critiquing like, you know, like more restorative justice ideas, right? Like they talk about like trying to rehabilitate Harvey Dent or rehabilitate the Joker. And then Bruce switches the channel when he's watching on the news, and then you find out, oh, they've like committed some like horrendous crime, like trying to say that like you can't do these sort of things, which is like no one in their right mind would just agree to try to rehabilitate the Joker. Like it's not, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. It was just frustrating to go back to rewatch that after watching Batman and the Penguin to see how they handled those things with just a little bit more care. I've learned to just appreciate Matt Reeves' direction a lot more.
I feel like it's easier to do that when you tell a story that it doesn't have Batman, because Batman's not in the
No,
movie.
he's not. And I think that helps it.
Yeah, it's like you have to remove him in order to like really tell a story about the city. I feel like there's not that many superheroes whose stories are so tied to a location. Mm-hmm.
Aside from maybe Spider-Man.
That's what I was going to say. There's Batman, there's Spider-Man, and then there's Daredevil. And I feel like the thing that sort of helps someone with Spider-Man and Daredevil is like it's a real life location. So a lot of us already have a sort of cultural knowledge and understanding that they can easily infuse. Like I feel like the Across the Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse movies do that really well with New York. Yeah. Better probably than the live action movies do with New York. But like there's moments watching the film where you're like, ah, yes, this is New York City. That I feel like if you're creating a city that doesn't exist in real life, then you have to do some of this work in order to make it really land. Because, you have to make it a real place because it's so much of Batman's motivation and so much of his like character arc and story and what he's driven by. And if you don't really understand it, it won't land as well.
Yeah. And it just even like smaller things like the black woman who was playing the mayor in the Batman, she was genuinely trying to do good. Mm-hmm. Right. But in Frank Miller's story, he makes every kind of government official, social worker seem like incompetent, kind of goofy. You can't take them seriously on anything. And either he is letting sort of like his libertarian views like get the best of him way too much, or he's pushing to some degree for like people to like abstain from getting involved in that side of, you know what I mean?
What is Frank Miller's background? Like, where did he grow up?
I don't know that much, but his politics come out very strongly. I tried to rewatch it earlier today and I was like, nah, bro, this doesn't age that well.
When did it come out?
The comics came out a while ago, like a couple decades ago. The movies came out, I think, like 2010s. Yeah, it came out. The comics came out in 1986.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Because Reagan's in it.
That's what people's politics were at the time. Those were probably really popular ideas.
Yeah.
Nobody. I mean, not nobody. There were people,
In the minority, though.
Nobody in like the public eye was really on the wave of restorative anything.
I think this is just a better route to take Batman's character, instead of just like, I'm just going to like beat up people senseless and then like that's it. Like it just doesn't, I don't think it works with the political landscape we're in right now. And I think Matt Reeves read the room in the way that he wrote this story.
You saw that too in the Batman and how it ended. Like the final act that he really, like the final thing that Batman does where he really saves the city is like not in an act of violence. It's an act of service.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then that's what made people trust him when he's helping. I don't remember. It's like a first aid or ambulance worker. He tries to leave, and then she grabs his arm because he's like, "You make me feel the most safe." Obviously, that's when it like clicked for him. Like, oh, this is how I need to better serve this city.
It does make me wonder, like, where do you take his story forward? Because it's like we go to watch the Batman movies to watch Batman beat people up.
Well, I think he will still do that. I think so far it's been hinting at that, like Matt Reeves is trying to talk about like how the corruption in the city has destroyed the life of the people in Gotham. Like there's all this hints of like Falcone's character. I remember him saying something like alluding to the idea that like something that's been happening behind the scenes, it's like bigger than you think. Whatever Riddler was trying to expose, I don't think it stops with just Falcone and Bruce Wayne. I think there's other things happening in the city that I hope Matt Reeves handles it in a way, like I referenced earlier, to what we got in The Wire, that the larger you go up, you start to see how all of these loose ends are tied together with the string. And that I think would be a lot more fascinating than Batman just like beating up people to get closer to like a mob boss to try to take him out.
And you know what? He actually did set it up in a way where you could do that because his Batman was a detective.
Right.
Like the movie was a detective movie more than it was a superhero movie.
Yeah.
So, and it was fun to watch Batman operate in that way too. Okay, Matt Reeves' vision.
I'm excited with what he does with it. Nonetheless, would love to hear what you guys think for those of you that have been watching The Penguin, or for people that have read Frank Miller's work or have watched his animated movie for Dark Knight Returns. Would love to know what you guys think. Let us know in the comments below. We always love your conversations. And with that, we will see you all next time. Take care, everyone. Peace.